Welcome. This is the Aromantic Asexual panel. I am Shar, they, them, and an important thing to know is that in the description below, there is a link to SliDo, and that is how we are accepting questions for the panel. If you can post in the chat, and we will try to keep an eye on it, but if you want your question answered, definitely put it in SliDo. We're now going to go around in alphabetical order by first name and do introductions, as well as kind of an introduction to how you identify on the aromantic spectrum and how you figure that out in general. So we'll start with Helen.
Cool. Hi, I am Helen. I am asexual and aromantic. I've ID'd as ace for about 10 years and aro for about 6. I was at the con last year, so I might have met some of you there last year, and this time on a panel. Hi.
And Sarah?
My name is Sarah. Oh, sorry. It is morning where I am. My name is Sarah. You may know me from It Sounds Fake But Okay, the podcast, or you may not. That's cool. I identify as aromantic asexual. I'm in the US. I am from Michigan, but I unfortunately live in LA. And I'm here to party. So
Great. Snao?
Hi, I am Snao. I am Aro Ace. I've known that I've identified as ace for over 5 years now, and I've kind of known that I'm Aro for pretty much my entire life. But I didn't know there was a word for it until I started looking into asexuality. And I am coming from Canada, where it is also the morning, but not nearly as hot as it is in California. Luckily.
Millie?
Hi, my name is Millie. I'm aromantic and asexual. I've known as I was asexual since I was about 16 and aromantic since I was 19. When I realized I was aromantic, I joined as an admin for this Instagram account at Just Aro Ace Things. And at the time we had 100 followers, and 3 years later we've got 21,000. So that's kind of been my journey for realizing a lot of information about the aspec community and just sort of posting everything as I learned it, and it's turned into a great community for awareness and acceptance and everything. I'm currently in Belgium, but I've lived in the Netherlands, in Canada, and in England.
And I'm Shar. I realized I was Aro just a few months ago, and I usually just say I'm Aro Ace, but I really love the hyper-specific label of qua-romantic. I feel like that really clicked for me. Let's see, do we have a SliDo question? How does someone know that they're Aro? Helen, do you want to try this one?
Sure. So realizing that your Aro can be quite a bit harder than working out that you're ace, because sex, if you know whether you're sexually attracted to someone or not, it's quite kind of a clear-cut thing. Hello. But romance, it can be a lot trickier to work out exactly what it is. Like there's certain things that some people think of as romantic and other people don't. So you can get to the point where sort of you think you like, for example, you want to hold hands with someone or you want to kiss them, but you don't want a relationship in a certain way, or you want certain things and not others, and trying to work out what's romantic and what's not gets tricky. And that's where knowing whether you're ace or whether you're Aro or not gets tricky.
I think sorry.
Yeah, so sorry, go on.
Sorry. The joys of online conferences. I was just going to say, for people who are both Aro and Ace, I've found that historically, and just based off of everyone's introductions, like I think we all kind of figured out we were Ace before we were Aro, just because there's a clearer line where it's like I don't look at a person and want to get in their pants, but I might look at a person and be like, ooh, I really like you. I want to spend more time with you. And like figuring out where the line between romance and a platonic relationship is harder, I think, because it's just not as distinct.
Yeah, so I think you've really got to work out where the line is for you personally, and then you can work out whether you're Aro or not.
I think I'm an exception to the order that Sarah mentioned, because I knew I was Aro before knowing that there was a word for it. And I just knew I didn't want relationships, period. I didn't, I was never drawn to having a partner, never drawn to the idea of getting married. And it took me longer to figure out I was asexual, because I guess I'm more romance repulsed and I'm not sex repulsed, because I just, it seems very impersonal to me, so I never had an issue with it. But I was always averse to the idea of people having romantic feelings towards me, so I kind of knew that before the asexual thing.
It's almost as if everyone has a different experience.
The people in the comments. I'm going to highlight the people in the comments who are saying that they also realized they were Aro before they were ace.
Yeah, so it's different
Sarah,
for
what were
everyone.
you doing? Oh.
I was just going to say, it's almost as if everyone has a different experience, and it's hard to generalize.
Wow.
Who to thunk it?
I think for me,
It's almost like, we're diverse.
For me, I'm quite romance positive when it comes to romantic media. So I always loved the idea of being in a romantic relationship, getting married, all that stuff. And so for me, being in the romantic relationship and realizing that I didn't like it, and I was romance repulsed if people were acting with romantic intent towards me, was the big clue in that I was actually aromantic, and that I didn't like people the way that I thought I did, and the way that society sort of forced me to think that I did.
For me, I think society made me think that a romantic relationship would make me happy, and I wanted to be happy. So it took me a while to realize that I didn't really genuinely want that for myself, and that I wasn't having romantic feelings. I was just having general like companionship, happy feelings. And what really helped it click was I realized I was just defaulting to asexual panromantic and like waiting for there to be evidence. And that phrase, it's better to have loved than lost than never to have loved at all. I was kind of like, no, it wasn't, because that was just a whole lot of upset and drama, and me being upset that the other person was upset, that I wasn't feeling the same thing they were feeling. And so I value my past relationships because they informed me, but just like emotion-wise, I could have just passed on all of that. Let's see if there's another question. Do you feel that either your Aro identity or your ace identity is more important to you? Well, start with Hannah again. It's okay to do.
I feel like I kind of go through phases of being very attached to one label or the other. Like I'll have like a couple of weeks where I'm like very, very into the ace community, and then I'll have a couple of weeks where I'm very, very into the Aro community. And obviously it's fine because there's a lot of overlap, but I definitely go through like times when one or the other is more important to me. And I don't know why. So
I think for me, my Aro identity is more important to me than my ace identity, because although I'm not like going out and trying to like pick up people to have sex, because that's just not my deal. And even if I weren't ace, I probably wouldn't be doing that just because of who I am as a person. But like for me, it's sort of like one follows the other. So like because I'm Aro, like I'm not going to find myself in a situation where I might necessarily be like pressured to have sex or that sort of thing. So like because I'm not seeking out those relationships to begin with, it's very much like the Aro-ness is what impacts my life more, especially because like as a society, like sex is kind of taboo, but romantic relationships are talked about all the time. And it's like people are asking you about it all the time. And it's like I have to talk about it more. Like people will understand if I'm like, I don't want to talk about sex with you. But if I'm like, why are you asking me if I have a boyfriend? They won't get that.
Yeah, and it's similar for me too. I want to make it like my Aro identity. I think even though people don't know romantic orientations nearly as well as sexual orientations, so I don't necessarily bring it up using words, but I definitely want to make it known that I'm just simply not looking for a romantic relationship. Don't ask why. Don't bother setting me up.
Yeah, I definitely think that being Aro is as well just more of an everyday thing, whereas being asexual is definitely more of a sex life is more of a taboo. So for me, my Aro identity is definitely more important just in daily life than my ace one. But because they go hand in hand, it's hard to say.
And the other thing
because I'm newer,
Sorry, go on, Chad.
Because I'm newer to the Aro communities and realizing it myself, I guess I value my ace identity more. And I think a part of what helped me identify as ace was this idea of like, oh, well, I'm probably ace allo-romantic, so I still get that happy ending. So I guess I was more reluctant to let myself realize I was Aro, because society has definitely framed it as like a sad thing. And I guess I haven't really developed Aro pride yet. So maybe one day my Aro identity will be more important to me. What were you going to say?
Yeah, the other thing I was going to add was that my Aro identity affects a lot more of my life. Like, as you say, sex is a very taboo thing, but when I'm aromantic, it affects, my living situation and my finances and that sort of thing. And you have to consider those things as part of your Aro identity. So it definitely feels like it affects more stuff. I don't know whether that makes it more important, to get back to the question.
All right, let's go on to the next question. Oh, there we go. Do you have any advice for dealing with Aro loneliness or the fear of being abandoned by alloromantic friends when they get into relationships? Helen?
Oh,
You're just put on the spot for everything.
I was going to say, no, and if you find any, get back to me.
I mean, what I've found is, specifically from doing my podcast, which is with someone who is alloromantic, and is in like a long-term relationship. A lot of it is just like communication, which I know is like, oh, of course, just talk to people, but like it's harder than it feels harder than it actually is. But like doing the podcast with Kayla has, and because we talk about this a lot, has, I think, made her more aware of how I feel about, like, as an Aro person, yeah, I do have that fear that my friends are all gonna, get married and like forget about me because they're just gonna be friends with married friends because it's like a different phase in life or whatever. But like, if you like make clear to those people that like your platonic relationships are really important, and if they understand that romantic relationships aren't inherently any better or stronger than platonic ones, then it always just depends on the people and the type of relationship you have, then that can help in terms of like them understanding, like, so that you don't have that fear as much because you're like, okay, I get that they will not intentionally do this to me.
Snao?
I don't know if I have anything to add to that aside from having a diverse set of friends. So not all of them are going to be in the same place at the same time. A lot of the friends that I have that I went to school with and I still keep up with, a lot of them have moved on to the relationship phase, marriage, having kids, and none of those things are for me. But I do have other friends that I can spend more time with. It also helps to have an online community to connect with people because that's always been something that has been a useful resource to me. I know it's not for everybody, but I'm lucky that I'm able to make those connections through various means, whether electronic or in person.
I'm a bit younger than some of you. I think I'm 21. So I think for me, I'm I'm not as scared as I used to be of people leaving, just because, you know, in the last year of elementary school when people really started dating, I thought, oh, when I get to high school, all the friends are just going to want to be hanging out with other couples and dating. And then I got to high school and that didn't happen. You know, I had a great group of friends. And even if they were in relationships, we still hung out together. And then I thought, oh, well, once I get to university, people are only going to be doing couple stuff and leaving me. And then now I'm in university. And again, that isn't happening. So I'm just trying to keep that in mind and thinking, like, if I keep strong friendships and I make it clear, as Sarah said, to people that friendship's super important to me, and that I surround myself with people who also think that romantic relationships aren't inherently that much more important than platonic ones. Then once I'm an adult, then hopefully people won't leave me and we'll still be great friends.
Yeah, Millie, I'm 22 and I graduated from college, university, whatever you want to call it, last year. And so it's definitely a jump when you, in my experience at least, when you enter like real adulthood, because it's harder to find and maintain friends when you're not all in one like specific place together. And so I think it's definitely been harder as I've entered like real adulthood. But you as always, you just got to find the right people to surround yourself with.
Yeah, definitely.
And make friends with Aro people. Get into Aro communities and make friends with Aro people. They won't leave you.
I get a lot of my socialization online, so I feel like I dig a lot of shallow wells in friendships. So if one person leaves, it doesn't make a big impact. But I mean, I know there is value to deeper friendships. I don't know. Sometimes I think I should try harder to have a deeper platonic relationship with people. And then I don't. So
I mean, there is no should. Like, it's not that like you shouldn't do anything just because people tell you to. Like, that's something that I've definitely been like trying to get into my brain is like, don't should, because that just, it puts you on a whole other track that someone else built for you. And it's like, no, get on your own track. Do what you want to do, feel you should do. Not, I just use should again, but you get the idea.
all right, let's see what the next question is. It's our favorite question. Do you ever struggle to understand exactly what romantic means or includes? Helen?
Hello. Well, you mentioned this earlier, Char, so feel free to chime in if you want to, but I also, as well as identifying as Aro, also use quaromantic, which literally means that I don't know what romantic attraction feels like. Don't know what romance is. Not a clue.
Yeah, I mean,
Sarah?
it for me in terms of figuring out that I was Aro, because I kind of used gray romantic for a while. I kind of like waffled on quaromantic as well. And then eventually I just was like, I'm just going to try on aromantic for size and see what happens. And then that's just, I never looked back from there. But like, I think part of the problem with my figuring out I was Aro, when for me, knowing I was Ace was so simple, was that like, it's not clear what romantic means, you know, like I might be, you know, talking to a new person who I really want to be friends with. And it's like, okay, do I have a crush on this person or do I have a squish on this person? Like, do I just really want to be their friend and like really like them as a person? Or do I want to like date them? And like things like spending time with someone one-on-one doesn't have to be romantic. You can still want to do that and have it be perfectly platonic. And so I think because, and also like when I'm thinking of like a certain example, like the person in question was a cis man, and so society was like, oh, you're a woman, you must like have a crush on this cis man. And I'm like, but do I, or do I just want to be his friend? Like I don't know.
I find that I mean, I kind of assume that I do understand, but I know that a lot of romantic people would object to me saying that, because I know, and this is also the case with being asexual and being presumed to not understand what sexual attraction is, what it means. I find that there is this attitude, even with sexual or romantic people who are familiar with these communities that, well, you just don't have that ability to understand that. And there's a difference between being able to feel it inside of yourself as a part of yourself and understand it in a more objective way. We have no choice but to watch romantic storylines and entertainment, so we see it expressed that way. I'm a pretty imaginative person. I write my own stories, so I have created these situations between characters of my own, and I understand it on a rational basis, but I guess some people just don't think that's enough and just want to still assume that I can't possibly ever understand it, when I don't know if that is something that's really fair to say, personally.
You'll know it when you feel it. Well,
Right, yeah.
Millie?
No, the same thing all you guys are saying. I mean, I have no idea. I like to think that rationally I know what romantic attraction is, but it's only sort of in theory, and objectively I really don't. But I remember this one time before I started dating one of my friends, he said that he liked me romantically, and I remember just asking him, like, why? Like, what does this feel like? Please explain it to me. And there should have been a big clue that I didn't understand romantic attraction, but it wasn't. And yeah, that whole just know it when you feel it, it really doesn't help if you don't know if you feel it. So just makes everything more confusing. I don't understand the difference between, for the longest time, I didn't understand the difference between two people like going for dinner and a movie as friends or as romantic partners. Like what would make it different, because you're doing the exact same thing, and yet because the people have romantic intentions towards each other, suddenly it's a whole different thing. I don't know.
For me, I had an Aro Ace friend explain aromantic to me as not wanting romantic acts. And I wasn't able to relate to that because I guess I'm more romance indifferent in that term. If to steal the like sex repulse, sex indifferent, sex favorable model. Because if someone gives me flowers, I'm aware they're trying to do a nice thing for me. I guess I feel a little awkward that I don't feel more about it. But as I mentioned, I really, it helped me a lot to find the definition of qual romantic or WTF romantic, because I have had blips like 3 or 4 times in my life where I'll just meet a person and off the first impression, think they're really amazing, want to spend more time with them because they're amazing and kind of feel a little glowy, but then that'll go away. So because those are so rare, because they went away, and I wouldn't like ever try to initiate a relationship based on a feeling that went away, I just, I feel like I'm obviously Aro spec, and it's easier just to stick with that and not. Right, now that I understand myself better, I really don't think romantic relationships are the way to go, and now I can try for healthier relationships. But right, not knowing exactly what romantic is difficult, and that's why defending your label is hard.
I think the whole you'll know it when you feel it thing is interesting, because I think probably people who aren't Aro do know it when they feel it. So if you're struggling to work out exactly what romantic means, you're probably Aro.
Yeah, at least Aro spec.
Yeah.
Let's see what the next question is. This one is a doozy. Thoughts on how the Aro community might become more of a presence or group, online or in person? Would it help if it was more distinguished or detached from the Ace community? Helen, do you want to try this one?
Yeah, well, I don't think detaching it from the Ace community is ever really going to work, because there are so many Aro Aces, and even those that aren't, the communities have kind of built up around each other. But I think distinguishing them is really important, because there are lots of arrows who aren't ace who don't necessarily feel as welcome in those spaces. So I think having them still be connected is good, but we need to know that they are different things, but they're, you know, building on each other.
I think for me, as a person who is both Aro and Ace, it's very easy to conflate them, as a lot of people who aren't Aspec do. Like, they don't realize that there is a split model. And so I think for me personally, like, it's so easy to kind of fall into that trap that, like, it would be hard for me to have like a completely separate you know, group, like distinguished group. But at the same time, like, Ace and Aro are not the same thing, and there are plenty of Aros who are not Ace, and plenty of Ace people who are not Aro. And so, you know, like, they do have different flags for a reason. So I don't know is the answer.
Yeah, pretty much the same as Sarah. They are definitely linked for me in the same way that other people with matchy and sexual and romantic orientations see it as one thing. But I think it's very important to acknowledge in both directions that not everybody is the same as me just because they relate to me on one side of it. So I don't know if I would ever be able to fully separate those communities. Like, I couldn't participate in an Ace community not acknowledging that I'm Aro and vice versa. So they're always going to be connected in some way because there is overlap in the concept and there's overlap in the community. And it's even for people who are only one or the other, supporting the whole, you know, Aro and Ace community. I think it's just so important that there's always going to be some connection between them for me, even though I fully acknowledge that not everybody applies to both categories.
Yeah, I'm not sure I could add anything more to that than it's definitely equally as important for me as well. Just, I can't have one without the other. They really go hand in hand. I think at this moment, especially because asexuality, while not everyone knows about it, it's definitely a lot more of awareness in queer spaces than aromanticism. So for the aromantics community to separate at this moment just wouldn't be possible, because so many people who realize they're aromantic or on the aromantic spectrum, whether they're asexual or not, come through asexuality on their journey to discovery and just awareness and everything.
This conversation reminds me of, unfortunately, I can't remember the channel, but they had a panel of different LGBT plus people and asked them about the community. And they were debating if this model of, do we kind of cut off the more normalized queer identities like gay and binary trans and let them fight for their own rights because they're succeeding relatively, or do we focus on the smaller identities that need more help, like non-binary and asexual and aromantic, and then push everybody up that way? But that can kind of slow down the progress of the more normalized queer identities. So that I think that model also kind of applies to Ace and Aro, where Ace is becoming more known, and Aro slowly behind it, I think, is becoming more well known. So do we focus on Aro? Do we focus on the spectrums and make sure that they become well known with asexuality? Or do we not try to take on too much of a burden and just focus on asexuality first and then Aro? Ethics question, no true answer.
I also think, like, going off of what Millie said about how a lot of people come to understanding Aro-ness through asexuality, like, you don't want to alienate people necessarily. Like, in what you were saying, Char, about like this group being like, well, should we separate like gay and binary trans people from like lesser known identities? But it's like, well, some people start with one and then realize they're the other, and like they use it as a stepping stone, or their identity just kind of changes. And I think if we separate them too much, then it would make like the fluidity of sexuality less emphasized, where I think like the fluidity and the spectrum of it all is one of the most important things about it. So it's a fine line to walk.
It seems like there are, some, not all, in the gay, binary, trans community who don't like that there's a whole lot of extra letters on. They don't want to be referred to as queer because they don't think of themselves as strange. Yep, and someone in the comments posted there can be gay aces, gay arrows. So yeah, there can be overlap, but I would say that the allosexual, aromantic, gays and binary, trans people, should they have their own fight to fight, and I can understand them not wanting to be tied to these spectrums, even though it does, like, the gut feeling is that it's suspicion that it's coming from a place of aphobia, and I don't know, can we make up a word of spectrum phobia? Let's see, do we have another question lined up? We do. Did anyone have any more to say about communities and rights and pulling each other up together? I guess I would add just the importance of ace and arrow people understanding each other's needs and representation is a way we can support each other. The next question is, have any of you been in queer platonic relationships, and how do you think such relationships differ from romantic relationships or close friendships? Helen.
Hello. Yes, my queer platonic partner is currently just there. There you go. And also in chat, so say hello to them. So we've been in a queer platonic relationship for about 6 or 7 years now. I think 7. Should probably know that.
It's 7.
It's 7, I'm informed. And yeah, we live together. We do all the kind of practical building our lives together type things, but we aren't romantically dating. They in fact have a fiance who they are in a romantic relationship with. I live with both of them and it's lovely. Yeah. It's queer platonic relationships are really hard to define because they're all different. Everyone who's in a queer platonic relationship just kind of builds it how they want to build it. There's not a specific definition for them. At least that's my experience of it. So everyone just kind of takes the bits of romantic relationships and the bits of friendships that they like and smush them together.
I have never had a QPR. I'm not the kind of person who's like actively seeking one out necessarily. I'm not opposed to having one, but like I think part of the blessing and the curse, as Helen, you said, is that like they're all kind of built up from the bottom. Like there is no standard way to do it. And I think that's great in that you have the freedom to kind of make it whatever you want it to be. But on the other hand, it's like I would have no idea how to approach that,
Yeah.
And so for me, I'm kind of just of the mindset that it's like, well, if it falls in my lap, then sure. But I'm not like having a partner of some sort to me, at least at this point, isn't so important that I'm necessarily going to like look for one.
Yeah.
I have not been in a QPR, and I'm not really interested in being in one because I have really enjoyed for the past 10 years at least living alone, having my own space, having my own freedom. And the way that I perceive QPRs, and this could be different from how other people perceive them, the concept that I have of them is basically like permanent roommate type situations that have a degree of commitment, financial integration, and social recognition of this permanent friendship that's a step above a standard friendship. and I have a lot of very close friends. I do care a lot about people. I just don't want to share a life with them in that way. So that is not something that I am interested in. I am actually really enjoying the life that I've built for myself now, where it's just me and a dog who's actually not here this morning. So unfortunately, she's not going to jump up and lick my face in the middle of this streaming. But that's, yeah, unfortunately. But I don't feel a need for another person. There's no practical need. There's no emotional need for me personally. So I, don't particularly, like, I don't want to QPR myself. And the way that that differs from romantic relationships is it's just about the practicality for me, while my aversion to romantic relationships is the emotional side as well. But with QPRs, the way that I conceive of them, it's all about applying the strength of a friendship and compatible life goals to a practical living arrangement.
Millie?
I've also never been in a QPR. I would love one, but I'm not actively seeking one out. For me as well, I've lived so far in 4 different countries, and I'm planning to live in a whole lot more because I want to travel for a living, basically, after I finish university. So I don't see how exactly that would work for me because it's not quite practical. One of my best friends from high school, when I figured out I was Aro and I told her about queer platonic relationships, she said, well, isn't that basically what we had? And I think for friendships and queer platonic relationships, a big part of it also is that you acknowledge that it's different, and that, you know, you can't exactly be in a queer platonic relationship without realizing that it's a queer platonic relationship because of the level of commitment and building your life around each other and finances and everything that goes with it. But again, they can look like romantic relationships, they can look like friendships, they can function anywhere in between. So it's, yeah, that's all I really have to say about it.
I think, yeah, another interesting thing that Sarah and Millie, you both said, was that you'd be open to it, but you're not actively looking for one. Neither was I. We were just friends, and then we were like, let's keep doing this forever. Yeah, so I don't know how you'd go about actively looking for a QPR.
There are dating sites for ace arrows where you say you're looking for a QPR.
Okay, then that's cool.
I have
There's
seen
the Ace app. Let me just say that before I forget. Everyone should go on the Ace app. You can just like talk to people through that. Anyways.
I've seen some people talk about QPRs as I'm in a QPR, but the other person doesn't know it, which sounds strange to me because, like Millie said, it's something that you have to be in to know, and you have to like decide that you're in a QPR. Basically, I think it's very, very odd to basically put somebody in that position without their understanding or their consent. So that's something that I think is important to make aware about QPRs, is that the difference between that and a very close friendship that means a lot to you is about a practical side of it. It's something you have to talk through to really establish as being what it is.
It's got to be a mutual thing, yeah.
Yeah.
The biggest part of QPRs is boundaries and communication, like communication.
So I'm highlighting a post. Is it only QPR if both people call it so? If the dynamic is that, but one person sees it as friendship. I think this is kind of in line with I talked in the Ace Fiction panel about labeling characters as ace that didn't intend to be, and characters who may seem ace but don't label themselves as that. And then I think it's true also for real people that even if you don't experience sexual attraction or have other ace characteristics, but you don't label yourself as ace, we shouldn't call you ace. So if you have a relationship where both people haven't defined it as a QPR, I don't think we should call it a QPR. But what are other people's opinions?
Obviously, everybody will build their QPRs a bit differently, but one of the hugest things for me was that choice, that decision of like, this is what we're calling it. We're not calling it a friendship. We're not calling it a romance. We're calling it this thing. And if you haven't talked to the other person and made that decision with them, it feels a little bit weird to call it a QPR.
The way my co-host Kayla describes a QPR is like, so she and I have like a very deep friendship, but when she moved across the country for a job, she didn't like talk to me about like what our plan was in terms of like, you know, am I going to go with her? Like that wasn't a discussion she had. She did have that discussion with her boyfriend. So like, I think it's impossible to have it be just like one person thinks you're in a QPR and the other one doesn't recognize that, because like the communication there, like it's a part of what the relationship is. And so like, and I think often that intentionalism, I guess, is really what makes it a QPR. Like, sure, I'm great friends with Kayla, and we care about each other a lot and we have a podcast together, but like we're both on the same page in that like if she's moving across the country, she doesn't ask me. I didn't ask her when I moved across the country, you know? So
I think you really like it's like with all sorts of other things, it's fine to take inspiration from things in fiction, from things in stories, even from things in other lives where you find that you relate to something that has happened to this person or happened in the story, and you perceive it in a way that you want something similar in your life, and in your life you're going to call it a QPR. And it's fine to make that choice about your life while still saying that you were inspired by this other person or this piece of fiction. So we can't impose our own terms on things that aren't our experiences or aren't our writing, but we can certainly still be inspired by it. And I don't think there's anything wrong with, you know, telling or reading into something and thinking what I see in that inspires me to have a QPR in my life. It's not necessarily rewriting the, you know, what you're reading.
In college, I had a friendship with someone who I had been friends with in high school, and we happened to move to the same city. And you know, I was staying in her apartment all the time, and she was staying in mine. We shared a gallon of milk because we couldn't finish it on our own, so we would move it back and forth between the apartments. And
milk.
Right. And we even said like, oh yeah, if like we don't find a person by a certain age, we'll be each other's person. So like we didn't have the words for QPR, but we had like loosely defined it. And we had talked about it since as like, yeah, that was kind of QPR territory. But she's found a person and she's aromantic. So that goes into the fear of being left. Right. So one thing I struggle with is with QPRs. I don't know if I actually want a QPR or if that's just me trying to like fill the void of a lack of romantic partnerships and feeling like I should have some kind of pairing in my life, some kind of most important pairing relationship. And I don't know how to know that, so I'll just keep thinking about it.
Yeah, that's absolutely a thing that QPRs should not be. They shouldn't just be a way to fill the voids.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's
I
why
do wish I could be happier. And QPR should not just be a way of becoming happier.
Yeah.
Did anyone have anything more to say about QPRs? Because we have one more question and 7 minutes left.
Let's go.
Move on.
Yeah.
Okay. Can aromanticism be portrayed in art, which I would expand to writing, in a positive, happy way? Helen, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, sure. Yes. I'm gonna presume we're going with examples here. If you guys were in the fiction panel, there was a really interesting discussion about like whether to use labels or not in things. This one didn't use labels, but the Good Omens TV show, I absolutely read that as an aromantic pairing, and it was so happy and so lovely. And yeah, if we had stuff like that they actually use the word arrow in, that would be perfect. So it can obviously happen. We just need some more of it, please.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like there's not a ton of it where the words are used, but I'm a writer. I want to go into TV writing, and I'm going to put that into everything.
The main example that comes up for me is Summerbird Blue, but she's kind of like traumatized and questioning things, so it's not like a happy Aro story, but I think it was positive in that no one implied it was bad for her to be Aro.
Yeah, it's a balance between
I recently read
having
Love
a
Lift by
character be.
Oh.
It's a balance between having somebody have a complex story and a character, not just being two-dimensional, while also not having some kind of trauma in the past that is linked to their aromanticism. So there's a balance that you have to, like, the aromanticism has to just be able to stand on its own, while that's also like a complete character that, like everyone else, every other main character in the story has depth to them.
Okay, we have a last minute two-part question. I struggle knowing if I experience romantic attraction or if I just want the things that society assumes are romantic, such as closeness or cuddles. How do you sort that out? And let's not go in alphabetical order. Just if you have something to say about it, speak up, because we're running out of time.
For me, it was definitely romantic intent. So if I felt that someone had romantic intentions towards me and I would feel uncomfortable with that. But if I think about like emotional closeness and cuddling, which is definitely more of a sensual attraction thing, so it's more physical. So sometimes it's important to separate physical attraction, such as sensual, aesthetic, sexual, from romantic and sort of that emotional closeness. But for me, it's definitely intentions.
For me, I don't differentiate between those forms of attraction because I just decided I don't feel attraction at all. Anything, like if I think someone looks pretty, that doesn't mean I'm aesthetically attracted to them. It just means I think they're pretty. And that's just the way that I make sense of it.
The second part of the question is, do you have any ways that help you differentiate between the different forms of attraction? I found it very helpful to watch several different videos with the like 5 attractions model, more attractions model. There's the basics of romantic, sensual, sexual, platonic, altruist. Wait, I'm missing one. I'm sure they'll be in the videos if you look for them. What? Aesthetic, thank you. And then some people will also go on to say like, intellectual attraction, emotional attraction. So just knowing that that's out there kind of helped me differentiate and getting some examples. And then just kind of sitting with myself and thinking it through, like, what was I feeling? What specific traits about that person did I enjoy? And like, what do I want to do with that feeling? Because kind of the perception of these different attractions are going to be different for each person, and they're going to be really hard to express. So it's really just you and your brain. Sorry.
Yeah, it just comes down to a decision in the end. You decide on your own definitions of these things.
Yeah, and some of them, for a lot of people, they're linked. So if you experience like 2 at the same time, it can be kind of difficult to sort that out as well. But just
and there's not necessarily a practical. Yeah, a lot of people don't have a practical reason to separate them, and I totally respect that people see, their romantic moments intertwined with their sexual moments, with their sensual moments. Like, that's just part of their overall experience. It doesn't need to be divided for everybody, but it definitely, like, it's just the way we think and the way we feel is different for each person. So, we all have to respect that we're living through things in our own individual subjective way.
We have 1 minute left of this podcast. It's been wonderful to be reading all these comments and getting to answer your questions. And the moderator just told me that we got 41 questions in SliDo. So we're sorry we weren't able to answer a lot of them. But keep the conversation going. There's aromantic communities out there, and you can get your answers.
Y'all rock.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys.
You are valid, you are
Thank you for
human,
coming.
you have emotions.
All right. Great panel, everyone.
Go team. Go arrows. Team arrows. Am I right?
All right, I'm pressing the end broadcast.
Bye.